Okay, we've got the live stream going now so that the folks all around the world can be watching this great presentation as well. So, problem solved. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Michael Lees. He is a 11-year veteran at the Coast Guard, worked in their drone program. Fantastic subject. We've seen the drones in the sky. We've seen, can we shoot them down? How do we know that they're up there? This is really about cybersecurity, and I am really excited to welcome Michael because it's not a topic that we always hit, but it's becoming more and more important. So, Michael, without further ado, I'll have you come on up.
Thanks, Nathan, and thank you to GSX and ACES International for the invitation to speak today. I really wish I had been able to go before the last presentation. It's hard to follow that. I don't have anything nearly as cool to show you. This material may be kind of dry after a awesome robot dog walking around, but I'll try my best. Nathan said, my name is Michael Lees. I'm with the UAS security branch at CISA. And you may be wondering, how does an 11-year Coast Guard veteran end up in drones? I was involved in their, creatively enough, the Coast Guard named it the Guppy program, Group 1 UAS Prototype Program Initiative. Yes, that's an acronym within an acronym, which is the most Coast Guard-y thing ever. Today we're going to explore a critical aspect of these unmanned aircraft systems, or drones. You'll hear me interchange those quite frequently. They mean the same thing. We're going to talk about their cybersecurity. Generally, as technology tends to evolve, those threats that target them evolves with it. These drones are no exception, and by the time we're done today, I hope you're going to walk away with some key insights and some best practices to facilitate a cybersecure UAS fleet. Great. So I have run into a few people today that do not know who CISA is, so just a little bit of background. It's the youngest agency in the federal government, established in 2018 to be America's cyber defense agency. We serve as the national coordinator for critical infrastructure security and resilience, leading the effort to understand, manage, and reduce risk to the cyber and physical infrastructure that Americans rely on every hour of every day. The majority of our nation's critical infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector, as you know. So operational collaboration is foundational to our efforts. We work with a wide array of partners across the globe, from federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, privately held critical infrastructure, nonprofits, academia, the research community, and we connect them all together to the resources, the tools, and information that'll help them fortify their security and resilience against current and emerging threats. Now, the UAS security branch specifically focuses on identifying and reducing UAS cyber and physical risks to critical infrastructure by doing basically the same thing, providing expertise, essential guidance, analysis, and direct support to public and private sector stakeholders. In the interest of time, and since if you're sitting here, I assume you're somewhat familiar with UAS and their components, but just a brief overview. You have your nano and your mini UAS, your small UAS, your medium UAS. I'm going to skip over the specifications for those, but if you do want to hear some more, you can find me afterwards. We're going to be focusing today on pretty much the mini to the medium UASs, your Mavics, your Autels, your DJIs, your Uniques, so on and so forth, Skydios. Again, a very high-level overview of how these drones function and how the systems operate. Ground control station, obviously, the operator uses this to send in the command and control data. The flight controller receives that data, sends the information to all the various components and subcomponents in the drone to tell it what to do. The camera is another one. Obviously captures images, videos, provides live streaming. Now, why am I talking about some of these components? It's to drive home a very important point. These are all connected. They're all connected components. So if you leave here remembering one thing today, please remember this, that UAS are ICT devices, information communication technology devices. Very often, they're not thought of as such, as just a, in the recreational market, a flying toy, and in the commercial sector, something that can improve your business processes. but they're built upon layers of software and hardware that communicate, process data, and interact with other systems. And as such, they need to be treated the same way and be integrated into your organization's device management framework accordingly. So it's virtually impossible to continue on with this conversation without addressing some of the natural security considerations. And if you've listened into any other CISA presentations today and yesterday, you've probably heard a recurring theme that China emerges as a key player in this global narrative. This is the last point on the slide, but I'm going to mention it first because it's extremely important. The 2023 National Cybersecurity and ODNI Annual Threat Assessment, they both characterize China as the most persistent cyber threat to the United States. Their sophisticated cyber capabilities and strategic objectives raise concerns about data collected by Chinese UAS operating on American soil. One moment. Now, it's a surprise to virtually no one, Chinese manufactured drones hold a commanding position in the global UAS market. Their advanced technology, their competitive pricing, they've all positioned them at the forefront of the market, making their drones ubiquitous across various critical infrastructure sectors. I want to talk quickly about the Chinese National Intelligence Law of 2017. If you're not familiar, it mandates that Chinese organizations and its citizens support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence work. In simpler terms, it could compel Chinese UAS manufacturers to share data that they collect with their government, regardless of where it was collected globally. Executive Order 13981 of 2021 sought to address the risks posed by connected software applications tied to foreign adversaries, further underscoring the security considerations linked to Chinese-made drones. It basically instructed the federal agencies to assess their drone fleets in that context to explore alternatives to or how to mitigate tactics for drones manufactured by adversarial nations such as China, North Korea, Iran, and even Russia. And then one last point to mention is the Chinese military civil designations. China tends to blur the lines between civil and military sectors. Many seemingly civilian entities, including some prominent UAS manufacturers, have funding and other close ties to the Chinese military. Oh, there we go. So to what type of cybersecurity issues are drones vulnerable? At the heart of these considerations is data collection. Drones, by their nature, are prolific data gatherers. They see, they record, and they transmit. The transfer of this imagery, telemetry, operational logs are obviously a huge concern. In the wrong hands, this data can be weaponized, making it imperative to be aware of the origins and the security of the UAS technology that we're using. If not secured adequately, this information can give adversaries invaluable intelligence about our critical infrastructure. So to drill down on this just a bit, patching and firmware updates, just like any other ICT device, drones need regular software updates. If these updates are not properly vetted, or if they're intercepted and manipulated, they can introduce new vulnerabilities or even turn a drone into a malicious actor within its own network. We all know the importance of patching your devices and your systems, making sure they're up to date, but doing that can inherently introduce a risk into your system. And then UAS have the unique advantage of mobility and accessibility. They can reach areas that are otherwise hard to access, capturing vast amounts of data. This expanded data collection surface can be a double-edged sword, especially if the collected data is compromised or exploited. Now, when you factor all of this into China's dominance in the UAS market and its blurred lines between its civil and military sectors, they take on a heightened significance. Excuse me. If these Chinese-made drones operating under the mandates like the National Intelligence Act of 2017 were to exploit those vulnerabilities, those implications for national security could be profound. And this isn't merely hypothetical. It was the national directives that I mentioned before have underscored these concerns quite clearly. Nathan, how am I doing on time? So, to the meat of it, what can your organizations do? What actions can you take to mitigate the cybersecurity risk? To ensure the cybersecurity of your fleets, you need to take a systematic and a holistic approach. From the inception to the day-to-day operations, all the way through to the final disposition, every one of those phases is important. And for anyone familiar with NIST's IT Asset Management Lifecycle Framework, these categories may look familiar to you. That's because there's really no need to reinvent the wheel here when it comes to cybersecurity for drones. You're simply applying already existing ICT cybersecurity recommendations that your organizations most likely already have. So you have your plan and design phase. This is where you incorporate your drones and its components and its subcomponents into an organizational cybersecurity framework for ICT devices like I just mentioned. You definitely want to isolate, air gap, or segment your networks to prevent any potential malware or breach from spreading to your enterprise network, potentially from the UAS. So for example, it's VLANs, VPNs, segmenting I mentioned before. This will minimize the organizational impact for potential cyber attacks. If somehow your UAS does become subjected to a vulnerability, you won't introduce that into your enterprise network. Yeah, you hear the term zero trust thrown out all the time. It applies here as well. Ensures all network access and transactions are continuously verified and authenticated, minimizing unauthorized access and shrinking your overall attack surface. We talk about MFA a lot too. Very simple step, but very powerful for your accounts. You've heard a lot here also about the integration of cyber and physical security. UAS is a perfect example of how you need to take your physical security measures and integrate them with those cybersecurity measures as opposed to working in silos. Procurement is extremely important. As I mentioned before, you want to follow those secure by design principles to proactively address those vulnerabilities. You need to know where your UAS are manufactured and to what laws those manufacturers are subject to. Kind of tacking on to the end of that, understand very clearly the privacy policy that's included with the UAS that you choose. You definitely want to implement a supply chain risk management program, again, which you probably would already have for any other ICT device, including a software bill of materials in the long term. And you're probably familiar with DIU's Blue UAS program. That's a list that's continuously evolving. I think there are 15 models on that website now. And those models have been vetted on both the cyber security side and on the supply chain side. So if you just Google DIU Blue UAS for anyone that's not familiar, it'll give you a lot of information. It's not a mandate that any organization needs to use them, but they are readily made available. The maintain phase, this is just continuously throughout the life of the usage. Maintain it in accordance with your respective IT asset framework. You want to implement a simple vulnerability management program, a configuration and change management program. Again, the firmware patch and updates, while those are important, you need to make sure that you're not blindly trusting them. And we recommend you use a sandbox environment or some sort of other standalone environment to vet those before you introduce them into your UAS fleet. Periodic log analysis, SATA training, all of this sounds familiar to you. And that's because as long as you recognize these drones as ICT devices, once you get that in your head, everything else kind of falls into place as far as the cybersecurity mitigation options that you can take. And then for operation, so these are more direct actions that an operator can take before and after a sortie. So you definitely want to verify that you have the current software and firmware versions in your platform. Maintain robust data at rest, data in transit procedures for encryption and storage. You want to make sure that you delete any data from any internal hard drive or any removable hard drive, like an SD card typically is what these drones use to store data. Preferably use some sort of secure encrypted connection between the GCS and the drone to prevent that unauthorized acquisition of your real-time sensitive data. We also highly recommend you do not do any live streaming. I'll get there eventually. So the realm of UAS cybersecurity, just like regular cybersecurity, is a collaborative effort. So it's crucial that we share information about discovered vulnerabilities and incidents. These are some of the reporting methods that I'm sure that you may be familiar with. The top two are CISA programs, and if you find me later, I can definitely give you some more information about them, but I believe I am running a little short on time. And if you experienced some sort of UAS incident, whether that's to your UAS fleet or externally to your facility or organizations via a UAS, please report that to us at the methods there. I realize that there's a belief that that doesn't really result in anything. You can report as much as you want, but nothing tends to change. I can tell you that that is not true. There are many things in motion. The more data that we have from you, the more incidents we have, the more ammunition we can have to implement that change that everybody wants. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. If you want more information, you can visit our UAS webpage at the CISA.gov website. We have a lot of great resources on there that can provide more specific guidance on this subject. Specifically, I want to call out the Secure Your Drone product, the cybersecurity best practices for operating UAS product, and the ChemLock products. If you have or if you have or would like to have HISN access, we also have a dedicated UAS and CUAS page on HISN. And of course, if you have any questions, I'm happy to field them now, or you can email any follow-up questions to our SUAS security inbox.
Michael, thanks. Absolutely great presentation. I'm sure there's some questions out there. One that I have, though, that I have always struggled with over the course of the last 5 or 6 years as we've been doing this uncrewed, it used to be called drone droids and defense. We've moved with the times. But we always kind of danced around this whole idea of the Chinese manufacturers and the threat. And as security officers, he mentioned a Blue UAS program. I know you were talking quickly. Effectively, what that is it's the drones, the platforms that the government would use, and not the drones that they won't use. And so if you're a security professional and you're planning to implement a program yourselves, lots of secure facilities out there, lots of reasons why you take on and tackle local threats, but this is an international, national level threat that's coming from the People's Republic. And I just wanted to ask you one question. We talked a little bit about the market dominance of the Chinese manufacturers. DJI is probably the most famous and largest brand, and by some arguments, they control 70 to 80% of the market. It was actually higher before. But from my understanding, one of the reasons they were able to accomplish that was because their drones are a heck of a lot less expensive than U.S.-made drones or international drones, and that's directly from the subsidization of the People's Republic. And so you can see sort of the grander, long vision strategy behind it. So I think conversations like this are really important to have and put kind of up front because we don't always talk about it. So thank you.
I got it. Thank you for clarifying the Blue UAS. And yes, we fully recognize, like you said, 70 to 80% market dominance. It has taken a slight decline lately with all of the news about Chinese manufactured drones. I can't single out any specific company. But even with that, they are still the beast in the market. And we're fully aware that they make better products. There are some bills moving through Congress now to hopefully give some more business incentive to American companies to build drones on par at that level to make them more competitive.
Questions? Right to you, sir. I'm going to let you use the mic.
Sure. Are the Blue UAS NDAA compliant?
Is Blue UAS NDAA compliant? I believe so. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to get with you after this and get you a definitive answer, but I think that they are.
Other questions? So just out of curiosity, how many people, by a show of hands, have a drone program and they're flying drones at their facilities? Okay. And of those folks, how many are using DJI? Okay. So it's it's tough because they're good and they're inexpensive. So I think the
Yes,
comments
sir,
you
they
made,
are.
the comments you made about air gapping and taking the kind of procedural approach to this that you would any other normal IT threat,
Right.
makes a heck of a
So
lot of sense.
our number one recommendation, obviously, if you can, try and stay away from those products. We realize that that's not always possible or practical. So whether you do or do not implement your cybersecurity best practices that you would for any other connected device, just to mitigate that risk as much as you possibly can.
Last call for questions. We got time for one more? No? Well, then please join me in thanking Mike. You a great presentation again. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any follow-up questions, thank you.